This episode is sponsored by Autodesk. I'm super excited to talk to you guys about Autodesk because I've been using their programs ever since I was in college. So today's message is geared towards you college students out there. They have announced a 3ds Max and Maya for any users that recent graduates, freelancers, hobbyists, and 3D artists just starting out have a more affordable way to access Maya and 3ds Max. This is your chance to get a hold of the industry standard for 3D creation. So go over there to makeanything.autodesk.com/me-indie. Again, that's makeanything.autodesk.com/me-indie, and go check them out. For all those indie users, this is also available to you as well. This is a great opportunity to get into the game at a very affordable price. Go check them out. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Game Dev Unchained, the #1 game development podcast about game development and the lifestyle thereof. I am your host, Brandon Pham, and with me is special guest, Reika Yoshino. How you doing, Reika? Or Ray?
Yes, I go by Ray. Doing pretty well, thank you.
Great. So before we dive deeper into the main meat of the topic of today, this is the part of the podcast where I ask our guests, which is yourself, a little bit about yourself, where you've been, where you're at, where you're heading, just to give a little brief overview for our listeners out there.
Yeah, of course. My name is Reika Yoshino, as Brandon said. I sometimes go by Ray for to make it easier. I am currently 28, and I am working at ThatGameCompany as a 3D artist and sometimes as an art team manager. I graduated from University of Pennsylvania in 2016, and then right after that, I moved to the Bay Area to work on this game called Spy Party as a 3D environment artist. And after a year and a half or so, I moved down to LA to work for TGC and on Sky. Yeah,
that is a pretty impressive trajectory there. So we kind of had a brief conversation for listeners out there, they're not thinking that I'm kind of guessing this, but you talked about how you're not an American, and were you coming from Japan? Like there's no accent in the way you speak,
yeah,
so I'm kind of surprised by this. Yeah.
Some of my background, I was born in Japan. My parents are Chinese. And then when I was 11, our family moved to Canada. So I'm actually Canadian. And I left for the States. So I left for university when I was 18, and I haven't come back since. So, so Canadians, very close enough, but we're treated as an international employee / student, whatever you are. So there's an added layer of struggles that, I'd be excited to talk to you guys about.
Yeah, so I recently actually have a friend that did the reversal. He's an American and went to Canada, and sometimes balance between working in Canada and United States still. And there is like this, he was recently telling me that he was kind of hit with this double tax standard thing. Would love to kind of hear a little bit about that. Because there's obviously really good companies in both and a lot of advantages to working in both countries. So can you kind of lay a little bit about the things that were surprising as you were kind of working in the American?
So I've only worked in America, so I can't give you a comparison between what it's like to work in Canada versus here. So I can tell you about the struggles that I've had as a student. So when you are an international student, you need to have a visa, or you're very restricted in what kind of job you can have, even as a student. If your college offers you like a work study, then you can. If you just want to work off of campus, you can't do that. And after graduation, or even as a student, actually during student, you get this thing called OPT. I think it stands for actually, I cannot tell you, but you get a year worth of OPT, which you can use for internships and you can use for working after.
Optional practical training for those who are.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yes. And you get a year, and basically you can use that period to find or spend on internships. Or if you don't want internships, you can save that until after you graduate, and you can work for a year on anything as long as you're employed. And if you are a STEM major, you get an extra, or you can apply for an extra 17 months of extension. I don't know if my knowledge is outdated, but I think I'm pretty sure. But you get a total of 29 months of OPT if you apply for this extension. And this is usually what allows STEM students to, STEM majors to have multiple rounds of visa lotteries. So it's a little bit more cushion for students like that. Unfortunately, what I did not count for STEM. So I spent 3 months on a internship, and then after graduation, I had 9 months left. So after graduating, you have about 2-3 months of grace period to start working. And I didn't have a job lined up during my college days, so I started job hunting after I graduated, and fortunately found Spy Party about 2 months in and started working. And I had 9 months of OPT to just work for them. And after that, there's a visa process that you have to start looking into. Fortunately, Canadians and Mexicans have this visa called TN visa, which is part of the NAFTA treaty. It's a single intent visa, which means you have to declare that you're not, you don't have an intention of moving to the States. So, which is very different than most of the typical visa that most international students pursue, and non-Canadians and non-Mexicans pursue, called the H-1B. That's like a once a year lottery. And because it is once a year, and it's you have maybe about 30 to 50% chance of getting it, depending on your degree and your circumstances. So that's why, as I mentioned earlier, having that STEM extension of extra 17 months will allow you to kind of have an extra jab at the H-1B visa if your company does sponsor. But a lot of the international employees and developers are kind of restricted by visas, from what I know, and it's an extra hurdle to kind of jump over. There are restrictions on all ends, but yeah, I'm here now, and I enjoy what I do. So I'm glad that even though it was a challenge, I'm excited to be doing what I'm doing right now. Fortunately.
Yeah, I mean, challenges are is to put it kind of lightly. Like I know with working with a lot of international colleagues that there is an extra layer of appreciation going through that process that I think local United States developers often underappreciate. They're complaining about their bosses, and that's like, how hard it is to work in this country and have these kind of benefits that you guys kind of take for granted, right? I always get that feeling and reminder when talking to my international colleagues. But yeah, so something as adjacent as Mexico or Canada, it still is like a lot of, I think, still better, lower barrier of entry than as if you were outside of North America, but yes, like there is still like a huge somewhat of a resistance to just hop over the fence and work freely, right? So what you were saying about temporary stay and with intent of not moving here is so yes. What exactly? So the idea is to let you work here, but definitely both sides agree that you cannot move here permanently?
You can't apply for a green card. That's what it means. I mean, you could, but you don't want to get caught, which is not something I want to get into. I don't yes. Don't listen to this advice, but yeah. So when it means single intent, if you're caught applying for a green card while you're on this visa, you probably will get your TN privilege revoked or something.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're on the H-1B, which is the visa I mentioned earlier, which is the lottery-based visa, that's a dual intent visa. So you are welcome to apply for a green card while you're on that visa. So there's a big difference. There are a lot of differences between different visas. TN also does have more restrictions in a way where it has a list of profession that qualifies for a TN, which is a limited set. And that profession also has to match with your academic degree. So I have a fine arts degree. And if I decide that I want to suddenly become an engineer, it probably will not let me because it doesn't match my degree. So there are restrictions on that front. I'm sure H-1B also has theirs. And
they would actually bar you from that job, or that job would not qualify. Like what exactly is the restriction there?
Yeah. So you need to. This visa kind of states that you already are like it's like you're a special talent and you already know what you're doing. Therefore, you get to work on this visa in this country. So without a degree in the position that I will be like working for, they probably just don't trust you that, unless you already have extensive experience working as, let's say, for example, if I worked in Canada as an engineer for 5 years, even though I don't have an engineering degree, then I might qualify for this visa. But if I don't have prior experience as an engineer and I want to become an engineer on this visa, the government will not let me.
Jeez. It's a lot of
so your profession is also kind of restricted too, which is
this is a lot of thinking, man. Yeah, I mean that I think that experience just in turn just makes the international game dev work harder than most. I think with every challenge, it actually makes you stronger. And I clearly see it's like, oh wow, man, you're spending way more hours than I am. Why is that? It's like, well, I get kicked out of the country if this and that happens, or whatever. And you really learn to appreciate like what we got here, which I feel within the United States and even Canada is a lot more blessed than other scenarios in other countries. Absolutely. For sure. So as you are moving up, as you are, graduating from school and landing that first gig and finally coming to that game company, I mean, this is a very short span of years of finally becoming an art manager at a well-established studio as well. Like, can you kind of give us a little insight of, did you come to that game company as a 3D art environment artist, 3D artist? And what project was it was it the same project as you're doing now, Sky, or was it something else before then?
Yeah, of course. Love to talk about that. So I'm going to rewind the story back to college again. When I was still a student, I think I was set on going into animation as a 3D artist. I haven't played games growing up. I didn't know anything about it, so I never really thought about it until senior year. I decided to play Journey on my friend's PS3. And that experience moved me so much that after I left my friend's apartment, I decided that I'm going into games. I'm going into interactive media, and I want to create environments that people could explore. So, it was kind of like an overnight thing where I decided to change my career trajectory very late into my in my academic career. And, ThatGameCompany and their titles have had a special place in my heart since then. So, I thought, someday if I can work for this vision, under this vision, it would be great. So I'll build up my career, and maybe in my late 30s, I'll get to work for that game company. Back then when I was still a student, like they weren't really hiring anyone. In fact, they were only maybe looking for engineers when they had positions available. But that's kind of how I looked up to them when I was still, in my early 20s. And after, after graduating, I didn't really have a long network because my school, University of Pennsylvania, is known for fortune in its business school. In our fine arts department, we don't really have anyone that works in the CG industry, animation, or games, or VFX, etc. So I ended up just cold emailing hundreds of companies in the Bay Area, and I found myself a mentor, and that kind of led to one thing another, and then I ended up at Spy Party and worked for Chris Hecker. So he's also another mentor figure of mine in my life. I don't know if he knows, but I consider him a big mentor figure. And he, I said, hey, I've been here for a little over a year. I don't think San Francisco is working out for me. I didn't really like the tech mentality in the Bay Area. I wanted to create something that moves people. I wanted to create work on projects that were, that could be summed up by just it's an experience, right? I was not interested in the tech scene with, big paychecks and kind of solving, this is gonna maybe not sound great, but I was not interested in solving problems for the minority of the world. I wanted to create something that could be experienced by anyone, regardless of where you are in life. And I thought I needed to get out. So I said, hey, Chris, maybe I'm looking to move out of San Francisco. Maybe it's Los Angeles, and That Game Company is in Los Angeles. Do you have any contact that you could introduce me to? And he forwarded my stuff to Genova, and things just kind of happened from there. So I'm currently working at my dream studio as my dream, with my dream role. So yeah, it is as you said, it is a very short journey here. But it is definitely very different being on the other side of things. And, I get to see a glimpse of, what might have happened behind the scenes for, my favorite game ever. So, that's interesting. And our vision hasn't really changed. And it's really, really cool to see a studio that's trying to make a path for, games that haven't been made before, games about humanity and altruism. And, we don't have, a preceding success story. I think we're trying to create that. And I think that's really, really cool. And in terms of art management, I found out that, perhaps I'm more organized and communicative than I thought. I love people. I love talking to them. I love making sure that, everyone's on the same page, everyone's happy. And I kind of took it upon myself to kind of start managing and organizing things, speaking up during meetings, speaking up about difficult topics. And I ended up finding myself here.
Oh, well, you completely engineered your career path from day one. So the very same way you found that game company journey being impactful in your life and switching career. And although, yes, working in tech companies, a lot of my friends have transitioned to tech companies for the very reason that you stated, in a higher salary, somewhat more stable-ish, right? But the main thing is that the excitement is not the same. It's rather much more dull overall.
Maybe
but
I'll end up there someday. But,
I know when we're older, when we can't, be as creative as much. Yeah, I mean, it is great nowadays to have that many choices as a game developer, where it used to be either AAA, and then that suddenly became AAA or indie, and now there's mobile, and now there's AA, mid-level companies. Like, there's a lot more choices now, and I'm excited for everyone. But I think that willpower to kind of bring you to where you are is one of those things that I have to constantly remind listeners and everybody. It's like, it's just being focused. Like you took the initiative, right, to ask about contacts and made it happen when you wanted to. That transition though, from, I'm sure you're still in there doing art, but not as much as it used to. Have always been, as recently as last week or the week before, I was kind of talking about. It is one of those necessary jumps in terms of acquiring more responsibility. But however, you're kind of like, it's a push and pull type of thing where you're kind of giving up the main reason why you went into games in the first place, to create these worlds and for people to experience. And now you're kind of playing as the puppeteer of making this thing happen.
Yeah.
Are you kind of consolidating into that role, obviously, where you're seeing you're being helpful in other ways than directly contributing to every polygon?
So that's an interesting question. So kind of my thinking behind this was that, my dream someday is to become an art director. And, I've maybe worked for a little under 5 years, almost 5 years. And in terms of experience, there's just so much more for me to learn before, I ever reach that stage. And, one way to grow, it's one thing to grow as an artist, but it's another thing to grow as a leader. I love creating art. I love creating things, but I also think important skill set for an art director is people skills, right? Not just, leading people through their artwork, but also being the person, being a mentor to the newer generation or the younger artists, being not just an art director, but like a mentor figure where people can trust you in your leadership. And that's, I never thought I'll kind of dabble in production, but it was kind of a way for me to, learn from the leadership in my current studio, and also kind of contribute to my team in a different way besides just polygons. So that was kind of my thinking when I kind of, took this role, took this task upon myself. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I always like to talk about, we've been doing this podcast for a long time. So all types of people, all types of color, male, female, have been through here. And I always like to ask if their experience they found is a little bit unique. So being a female in the industry, I think it's changing, but it's still very much a male dominated industry. And I think maybe somehow you kind of dodged this bullet of any sexism or any of that, because I think that game company is probably a well-balanced, pretty good studio to start with. But as you're going through this and maybe through your network, is there anything there that you can relate to and share about your own experience as a female being in this male-dominated industry? Or or even just your general experience of being just basically positive. I think all this is going to help inform listeners out there of like a better general consensus of like, is there something to this or is there not? Because I've heard stories. I've talked to colleagues of mine that are women, and there's naturally things that happen in meetings where it's like unconscious most of the time, but noticeable. uh, I guess I'll just throw it out there and we can move on after that.
Yeah. So, um, I've read and heard a lot about things about being a woman in game dev, especially in the early days. And, I would have to say it's definitely much better now. I think there's a lot more that the industry could improve on. I also kind of I was also very naive when I entered the industry. And, I thought it's like, oh, these things, it won't happen to me. Or even if it does, I will, just kind of navigate my way around it. Unfortunately, it does happen. And it is not easy to navigate around it. Sometimes you just have to, rely on your resources and your coworkers to make sure that you also feel safe, and you're comfortable. But the really cool thing about that game company is that we have a lot of women on our team now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really really exciting to see people like you, people that think like you, people that act like you, people that look like you, just you know kicking butt at their job. It's amazing. And even though it's easy to say that like it doesn't, gender doesn't really matter, and you could still learn from um, other mentors, and leaders in the studio. It's a little different when you're experienced and your life doesn't exactly match up with someone that you want to learn from, because the advice is not always applicable. I'm sure there are different sets of difficulties. I don't know if one has more than the other, but it is true that as a woman, you do face a lot of probably like subconscious bias and treatment. And as you said, like in meetings, that you can definitely tell that like sometimes when you're the only woman in a meeting, everyone else might not feel it, but you definitely feel like, oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable here.
Right.
Or there was one tiny incident where we used to have this thing called where we wear fancy clothes on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And back then we only had about like 4 or 5 women in a studio of 25-ish.
Yeah.
And I think I dressed up. I'm not sure if any other woman dressed up, but they were taking a group photo. And I was just not comfortable being in a group of a dozen dressed up fancy men, and I'm the only woman in there. I don't know what that message would send out, if that photo got out into social media. So those are kind of things that like kind of tug at the back of my mind. Even though there are no ill intentions involved in with anyone. So it is very interesting. It's tricky, and I think just have to make sure that you understand. As a woman, I understand my boundaries and comfort zone, and understand that you do have people around you that will be supportive of you and they'll trust you and believe you. So you're not alone, and I think because I guess because I still have those difficulties sometimes, like it would be nice that if I could, become a figure for someone in the future to kind of feel safe or be like a safe place for them.
Yeah, I completely understand. Like, because whenever you're at a company, you're always trying to immediately look for someone that's similar, because there's that instant connection and that instant support, right? And race, gender, that helps with the advancement, at least motivation to advance in the hierarchy, right? Because you can see that it's possible, and that comfort alone is just rewarding in itself to know that there's someone else like you there at a group setting. Every time I work at a company, there's always, the male always outnumber the women. The only time that I felt like it was close, not completely 50-50, was when I was working at a mobile studio, like a tech company, right? So tech companies are a little different from game studios. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, this is a lot of women here, right? Completely new to me. But like whenever I worked at those studios with very few women, I was like, man, these women, I feel bad because there's so much unwanted advances, so much like just the sky swarming around that. And it's just a lot of pressure, I think, on top of the actual pressures of performing well at the job, right? So I do agree that things are getting better. And I feel like the smaller companies just tend to have a better ratio. And I at least kind of see AAA companies slowly getting better, right? But like a major beast, it takes a little longer, right, to move things in the right direction.
Change happens over time. It won't happen overnight. So
right.
I think we'll get there. I think we just all have to keep working towards it.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm glad you're in the position that you are. You move past all those advances, right? And in a great place right now, in a leadership position at a very great company, and being as young as you are too. I mean, you're that's a trifecta right there. So, like, I think when I first became in a leadership position, or even when I switched to a new job, right, there's always that sense of imposter syndrome, and that kind of eats up from the reality of things, right? Did you kind of go through that phase, being such a young developer as well as a female, and all these things that you feel on paper should work against you, but clearly have not? It's all like internal thoughts in a lot of the cases. Did you feel what was that change like to finally kind of be at your dream studio and kind of leading a department?
I think there are two different parts of me that think differently, right? I think imposter syndrome is something that just doesn't go away. And I think that's maybe what every game dev or artists, creatives suffer from, because there's always someone better. There's always, you're just so critical of your work. But I think, if you kind of flip that, you kind of need to understand that because you can critique your work, it's just that your eyes are getting better, your perception of art and the thing is getting better. So it just means that, you just have to now raise your skills, and then it's just a rinse and repeat. But also at the same time, there's a core part of me that I understand where, the reason why I'm not always happy or I have an imposter syndrome is because there's so much I want to learn. And I know that there's a lot that I haven't learned. So I know that there's a, part of me that's like passionate and driven. And, even though I feel one way, I also do understand that, like, having that drive is also a unique thing about me, right? That's what makes me special, and that's what makes me continue growing, continue learning. And, you kind of live in this duality of, conflicting feelings. But, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to sound, it's not going to sound reassuring, because I think you will probably feel this way. No matter what you do, as long as you want to keep getting better and keep growing. I do also think like, oh, I don't have enough years of experience to, like, am I really, can people really trust me to do this? But, at the end of the day, it's like I care and I'm learning, and I'm open to constructive criticism and feedback. I think when you stop growing as a person and when you stop having this fear that you're just, if you start feeling like you're just good enough and you don't have to do anything else, it's like you might feel fine, but I think that's kind of when you stop being an artist, when you stop being someone who wants to make things, and you lose that drive, right? And it's really, really interesting. And I think I'm trying my best to just focus on the fact that, like, I want to get better. And because I'm still passionate, I'm still, I'm young and there's so much more that I can accomplish. And if I kind of start thinking about it like that, it becomes a little more positive, and you kind of stop thinking about the imposter syndrome aspect of working as a game dev.
Yeah, I think that internal conflict is always healthy. That means there's a lot more room to growth and humility to grow. You're clearly qualified, so I wouldn't I worry about it as much. I think if anything, I would love to kind of talk about we've had Cecil on this, even had Eric on this at the very beginning before the launch of the game, and now ever since the game has crossed a major milestone, right? 100 million downloads, which is insane, because I think it was one of the first, I would say, big major release on a phone, right? You guys made like this crazy shift, doubled down on phone being like the future, and now slowly it's looking to release on a console, on the Switch, right? So we'd love to kind of give get some insight from you about that journey of from mobile to now, like what somewhat surprising, somewhat not surprising, was this always part of the game plan for growth for the game?
Yeah, of course. So I actually joined ThatGameCompany / Sky right before they went out to beta, right before beta. So it was relatively early on. The game back then was nothing like what it is today. And when I joined, they just kind of shared the news with the world about what kind of game they were working on. And I came in not really knowing that it was a mobile title, because all the previous ones have been consoles, and I've always wanted to work on consoles. And I think at first I was a little confused, but the first thing I did when I started working was I played the game and I asked a lot of questions. And one of those questions that I asked different people around, in the studio was that why is it mobile, and why are, what are your thoughts on it? And ultimately, I think I kind of came around and understood where they're coming from. And the main reason was being, we want to create something that could be played by anyone, that has a big reach, and phones just happen to be a device that a lot of people own, right? And not everyone has access to phones and tablets, but there's definitely more people that own phones than they do a PlayStation, or an Xbox, or even a PC, right? So I thought about it, and if there is a game that I could play with my mom or dad who don't play games ever, phones would be the only way to play with them. And when I started thinking about my family, that's when I was kind of convinced that mobile might be a really interesting way to go about this. And I know we did hear a lot of feedback from fans and supporters, people that were interested in this game, that they wanted on a different platform. Why does it have to be on mobile? But our studio kind of stood by our beliefs that, like, games could be for everyone and should be for everyone. So it's been on mobile, but I don't think I think of this as like a mobile game. It's just mobile just happens to be a means to an end. And, with Switch, I think Switch is just like a wonderful console to have released on after the mobile because it's so portable and I feel like they're relatively family friendly too. It's a console, but it also does feel like a phone in a way. It's just I think the portability probably kind of contributes to that, and our entire team is so excited. They've done such a wonderful job on making this come true. Everyone's been, crunching to get this done, and it's kind of finally done. And now we get to kind of see our game on a full screen TV. It's pretty amazing. But our platform choices aren't exactly. I mean, we do have to think about the platforms, but like it's coming from a standpoint of like how can we connect people? How can we connect as many people, friends, family together, rather than which console has the most audience or which console it's best suited for. So in that way, everything feels very, very natural to me. And I think we did a good thing that it's mobile. Like, I think we maybe have created something, created a space on mobile where people can kind of find different kind of entertainment and enjoyment out of what they can do, especially in, hard times like during COVID and the pandemic. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, we're in that kind of weird phase right now. Not weird, but exciting phase where we're transitioning out of the pandemic, right? I can see that you're still at home. A lot of remote people are slowly crawling their way back in the office. Some studios are doing the hybrid thing. Some studios are completely leaving it up to the artist or developer, whether they want to do it full time at home or not. At the same time, the pandemic launched 2 new consoles, right? There's a lot of exciting things that are happening with all types of engines and upgrades. Without having, I don't want you to prematurely announce anything, but what are your general thoughts of this transitional phase? Is that game company still remote? Like, are you guys still hybrid? What's the
fully
consensus?
Remote for the next year?
Okay.
For the foreseeable time.
Wow.
It's a pretty long time. And I think because America might be like one of the few countries that's finally opening up, but, the rest of the world is not necessarily, fully open. So that's kind of interesting to see what games kind of offer, for those countries and players in that country. But yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with working from home. I think if, maybe the one great thing that comes out of this pandemic is for companies to be flexible about having a hybrid system. That would be a beautiful thing for me. But I like working in the office. I love seeing people and I want to collaborate with them. And I think especially when you create artwork, it's much easier and much more productive to do it in person. You don't have to go through the typing and communicating. It's really hard to communicate visuals and feelings over text sometimes, right? It's just much easier to see it in person. But when I'm wearing a producer hat, it's much easier to just work from home, just take meetings and heads down and get stuff out of the way. And that's probably why I prefer a hybrid structure, but I think everyone feels differently. And I hope, companies do kind of recognize that even if people do work from home, we still get our stuff done. And people will be bored out of their minds if we don't do anything. So we will be working and we will be responsible. But I think the companies have kind of understood that that is the case and people make it work. So yeah, I can't really speak on behalf of ThatGameCompany, but that's my personal feelings about working from home and pandemic.
Yeah, I think a lot of developers now are. There's a good mix, but I think most developers are still in that traditional development cycle of like, here's the pre-production, here's the release date, right? So with Sky, you guys went to the game as a service model. I would love to kind of hear that type of production cycle and how it differs from your previous experiences. Like, what made it unique? What made it, I would say, assurable? It's the more the mobile side of thing. It's like, we're making money. We're kind of okay. We don't have to pray in 3 years that when this game releases a hit, it's a hit. So everything we do now is an extra boost of strength, right? Would love to kind of hear your thoughts about the difference that you're seeing as you're managing this project and as you're kind of seeing the growth.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it. It's also the first live product that I have worked on. Um, I don't know when we launched we were going to succeed or not, right? I think the
Mhm.
entire team was, um, we were like, maybe this entire team will disband. I don't know if it got there, but I definitely had kind of thoughts about like, oh no, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
But now that it is successful, and now that we have to, we're expanding like crazy. We're hiring, and we have to make the product afloat, but we also have to keep the team afloat, and that's been really interesting. It's just really interesting to see kind of a studio and a project go from, is this going to be okay, to, oh my god, we have all these plans lined up, all within 2 years of launching, right? So um, I think as someone who is kind of involved in production, you are seeing a tiny indie studio where everyone's wearing multiple hats, to a studio, a mid-sized studio that needs structure and hierarchy. And I think introducing that could be very tricky.
Yeah.
You want people's voices, everyone's voices, to be heard, but when you have hierarchy, when you have structure, some of those things will get lost. People will not know what's happening throughout the entire studio. We would start becoming specialized. And I think we're still in the middle of that, so I can't really say how. I can't say if it's working or not working. We're in our little teenager phase of a company, I think.
Mhm.
And it's a first for me as well, because I've been interested in indie since graduating, and I think that's where the cool things do happen. Interesting ideas get experimented on. It's not, we're not trying to do like a um, cookie cutter game, and at the same time, huge risks come along with that too. So I think now we're kind of having to transition into, not to say a cookie cutter, but making sure that everything works and we have a structure, while trying to keep that spirit of, um, what's something interesting, what's something new that we can do, um, what's something that we can make that could still continue to move people, not just end up being like a daily chore or something.
Yeah, I think being part of something uh, at the early stages, before the I don't know if this succeed, and being a part of that ride of like, we're crazy successful, is such a rare time to be at a studio and in a project, right? It's such a rare thing, and when you do kind of experience it, that it's going to be transformative in a huge way. For the company to grow, for the project to get better, things have to grow, and yeah, it's a crazy ride. I think in all, because you're kind of finding yourself maturing as a manager, right? You're managing a lot more people, which means you have more hands on time on the project itself. Um, And I don't think that gets talked about enough, because I think a lot of people have been on successful projects before, but it's like, you're working on the sequel, right? So you're not part of that small group that made it happen. It's kind of like you're already a sure success, right? So yeah, even myself, I haven't really been part of a small team that it became a hit before. It's more like I've been on successful sequels or something.
I don't know if that even hit me yet.
Yeah, that's a pretty rare. That's really rare to be part of the rocket, basically, the first rocket. Yeah. So, just to give an idea of what was, so when you joined the team, how big was the team to
it was
now?
About 20.
Okay.
20. I think right now maybe we're a size of 60 to 70, including contractors. We just have new people joining every day now, which is really exciting. I don't know their faces. I don't know their voices. I cannot wait to meet them.
Yeah.
But
just wait till they ask you, like, are you new here? It's like, what? I've been here since the beginning.
Yeah, and maybe like an interesting bits of information is that if you go on the ThatGameCompany website, and you check out the team, we sometimes have caricatures of our full-time employees, and it's actually listed in the order of when we first started working. Oh, nice. So it's really interesting, because when I first started, I was at the rock bottom, and I was like, look at all these cool people that I'm working with. And now that people have like come and go, it is a little terrifying that I am one of the earlier members now too, especially at ThatGameCompany. It's a little surreal.
Yeah, you're the person now that when you enter the coffee room, everyone's just shush. It's like, wait, you guys talking about me? You're the manager now. It's like, shush.
In that sense, no, but there's no hierarchy in that. We're all very, we all respect each other, which is a beautiful thing. At least I can only tell you about the art team, but the art team is wonderful.
Yeah, our team is usually pretty cool. The engineering team.
Everyone else is also pretty cool. Yeah. Pretty cool.
Well, that sounds great. I think the last question I really have for you is that everyone's obviously looking forward to any future updates with the game itself, to the release on Nintendo Switch. I think it would be huge. Are we, I guess, can't really reveal anything what's next, but like, you're on this trajectory of eventually wanting to be an art director of your own project, right? And I think we're all looking forward to seeing what that is. I know you talked about this before, saying that you have a lot more to learn. But I'm going to ask really how much more, like what are we talking about here? What threshold do you have to cross before you feel pretty confident to march into Genova's office? Really? And like, I want to art direct. Like, how far are we? Like, what are the goals that you have to hit before you feel like I can take something on?
I think maybe what it is, I have, I'm still in the middle of forming my beliefs of what I want to make, right? Like right now, I still feel like I'm piggybacking on this game that have inspired me and changed my life. And if someday I'll, if I get to form a strong, like solid belief of what I think games should be like, and what interactive piece should be like, and being able to stand my ground and have the art skills to back it up, that's probably when I would start feeling confident, I think, about what I've done and how I feel. And I think that's a pretty difficult place to be, because to stand up for your beliefs and kind of be able to back it up, that's hard to do, even when it's not just a creative piece, just any little thing in life. I think it's hard, right? Trying to live your life the way you want it to is also really difficult. And I think a smaller version of that is just trying to trying to create what you want without compromising too much. And I think, like that's that thin line, like that fine line between, being a dictator versus like a good leader is also, that's difficult, I think.
Mhm.
And I think, when it comes to people, I think you can never stop learning. That there's just going to be just so much. And I don't think I'll ever stop feeling like I have so much more to learn.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of weird people. That's what I say. So there's a lot to learn from these people.
There's a lot to,
and learning their kinks, their what upsets them, what makes them happy. And it's a constant juggling as a manager.
Everyone's different.
Everyone really is different. Yeah. And for you to be successful is to kind of balance those differences and still, aim high and get the project complete. So yeah, I completely agree with you. That's going to be a never ending journey when it comes to that. But we made it through an hour. So that's a journey in itself. And I want to thank you for your time and coming back since GDEX basically, to kind of go a little deeper. Because last time Cecil kind of, he talks a lot, right? He kind of steals the spotlight. So it's great to kind of, it's kind of good to talk to you, Ray, about your story and learn about, specifics about your own career path. This is the part of the podcast where I actually shut up and give you the mic to kind of give the listeners out there awareness, anything that you want to talk about, any cause that you want to give attention to, any website, any Twitter handle that you are comfortable giving so that people can find you. This is the chance to kind of share that information.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's a lot. But I'll just start off with, if anyone does want to talk to me or reach out to me directly, you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Heartbreaker, with the Reika part being my name at the end. And yeah, I think, there's not much that I can give to like veterans in the industry, but especially for younger developers, I would love to be your help. And, finding people and finding connections is really, really difficult. So, if any struggling artists or developers are out there and that you want someone to talk to, I'm here. So please feel free to reach out, and I'd love to be support if I could.
Don't say that. Everyone's gonna raid your inboxes now. You said you would.
I'm also really bad at responding to messages. So if if any of these DMs are more specific, than if it's more if the messages are crafted in a way that I can easily answer instead of like, hey, just can I get some help? Like, what do you need help with, right?
Yeah.
And my experience is also limited, and if anyone that wants to give me advice, like, please, I would love to hear from you.
Oh, now you're opening back up. You patched that hole. You kind of dug, just saying like, I don't get back to you. That's quick. Now you're opening it up again. All right. So before we bombard your inboxes with questions, I want to again thank you for spending the hour with us and sharing your story. As always, super educational. I've learned a lot as well as our listeners. But that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you for joining this week, and I'll see you guys next week.